Hello, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for being here this morning with us. I'm really pleased to introduce this panel of the European Music Forum. My name is Audrey Guerre, and I coordinate Live DMA, the European Network for Live Music Venues, Clubs, and Festivals. You will not be surprised to hear again from me how much the music sector has been hard hit by the current pandemic crisis. The challenges we were already facing have been multiplied by this crisis, whether in terms of economic fragility, the enhancements of artistic and cultural diversity, and the need of spaces for artistic expressions for all the music practices. Music gathers people, whether it is to sing in a choir, to play in a band or in an orchestra, or attend a live music performance. And people suffer from these privations related to the pandemic restrictions. The music organizations were dramatically impacted, especially the ones which were out of the scope of the cultural departments and ministries. During the lockdowns, and as Jan mentioned earlier, some online solutions showed the willingness of the people to practice, to perform, and to attend and share music. However, I believe that these were probably temporary solutions. And from the live perspective, the ticket sales for the autumn activities show the eagerness to meet and enjoy music in physical and live conditions again. The scientific-based evidence, as well as the feedback from the sector that were gathered, for instance, within the European Agenda for Music, on the impact of music on well-being, on cohesion, and on its economic spillovers, were matched during this crisis by the sensitive experience that affected the sector and the music lovers during the past months all over the world. The difficulty in concerting and bringing the sector's recommendations as a priority to policymakers show that there's still work to be done for culture to be in the central place in the European and member states' policies. So the question behind is, what is the place for music in society? And Angelique Kidjo made a strong statement a couple of music ago. She said that music provides common grounds, and through music we bring another way to talk about the society's challenges. We've seen it. Culture and music are so important for our well-being, and especially for the youth, so that we must allow culture to exist even during the most challenging periods of our times. And what I will take out of this speech is also that we all have a role to play to build bridges between our different fields and practices. So during this 3 days forum, we will dive into the situation of the music ecosystem nowadays, all together with experts from the sector and policymakers, and see how we can cooperate on joint means of actions to give culture and so music the front seat row in the future of the resilience and recovery policies in Europe. So I am here today and this morning to introduce this session with Paulo Pires do Vale, who is the commissioner of the Portuguese National Plan for the Arts, with Barbara Gessler from the European Commission, with Niklas Nienass, a member of the European Parliament, with Tere Badia, who is Secretary General of Culture Action Europe, and Moritz Eggert, who is a composer and president of the German Composers Union. Each one of them will make an introductory statement, and then I'll go through 1 or 2 rounds of questions, and we will leave the room for other questions with the attendees. So I suggest that we start with Moritz. So please, Moritz, I invite you to turn on your mic and address to the audience and to our attendees. Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey, for your introduction. I hope you hear me well. Everything's okay with the sound? Good, okay. Yeah, as a composer, I'm often asked, how do composers deal with the COVID crisis? What were your experiences? And of course, I'm not the best person to answer this question because I'm a performer as well. So I know both sides. For the performers, as Audrey already said, it was a pretty dramatic time because he goes practically from 100% working, performing, practicing to zero in a matter of a few weeks. And I think that was a big shock for all of us. Psychologically, for me, I can say that 2020 was pretty much a lost year regarding my creativity. I was much slower than usual. Most projects were cancelled. I mean, we all had the same experience. I don't have to go into details about this. But I had a lot of motivation problems because even as a composer, even if you write music, you still are dependent on the performances and you're dependent on the communication that happens with these performances. I'm very curious about how audiences will react to my music. I learn from it, and this communication process is really important. But it also taught me personally to rely more on the things that are really important to me. I mean, I had a really deep thinking about what I want with my music, what I want to communicate. And so in a way, it was a lost year, but it was also an interesting year because it showed me a different perspective. And I feel now, when we slowly perhaps return to some kind of normalcy, that I have a better equipment to deal with the coming challenges. And there will be many challenges. And this is the most important point. I think the real challenges are ahead of us. The corona crisis was a crisis basically for everybody, not only for us artists, but it was a crisis for the hotel business, for restaurants, for most parts of society. It was a dramatic crisis. And that's some of the discussion I have with colleagues, musicians. They only see their own perspective, but I always tell them, okay, we have really been affected really badly, but other parts of society have been affected as well. And we have to take that into account, and we don't have to say that only we are the victims of this crisis, but we have to see it in perspective, because that will make us much more serious in communicating with politicians. Because of course, in a way, I don't think that the politicians have a really easy job at the moment, because basically everything they do, people will say, this is wrong, why I am not important, why are they more important? And so regardless of what you do. And of course, many mistakes are made. I don't say that politics worked perfectly in this time. And they make a lot of mistakes, but this is natural in a catastrophe like we experience. This is no excuse. And of course, we can discuss the mistakes, but we have to take that into account to put us realistically into perspective. One of the most important things also is to see music not as something separated from culture, but as something part of the culture. So we are also solidaric with theater, with literature, with the arts, with museums. And so we are part of that scene. And all this scene is also part of what I would call education. If we look at Europe, we can see that the countries who put a lot of stress on education in general also seem to have a good cultural scene. And I think education, culture are married. Yeah? They are really, really close together. So we have also to, if we argue with politics, we have to stress that culture is not something like an entertainment or, it's for the elite, they can go to opera houses or anything, but it is part of an education. I was suddenly kicked out. I didn't touch anything. So I suddenly was asked to rate my performance as a speaker. Okay, when I was trying to get to my most important point of my introduction. So we are part of education, and that is what we have to stress. Music is so integral to education in general. I mean, you know that there are many scientific researches about this as well. But we have to stress that we are part of education. And that is the big heritage of Europe, and is our most important asset. And I think this is something that really unites Europe as an idea, because we come out of a mutual understanding of culture and education, and this is our strength. And I think in a time when AI, and this is what will happen, we all know it, will slowly take over more and more parts of our daily life, and a lot of menial work will be done by robots or artificial intelligence. This will happen. We know it. Slowly it will change our society, and that will make education and the arts even more important. We already see that trend, that in a way what Joseph Beuys, you know him, the artist, the German artist, that everybody is an artist, in a way has already happened. I mean, we have a lot of people who express themselves on YouTube, on social media, and they see themselves perhaps not as professional artists, but at least as hobby artists. And there are many, many more than there ever used to be. As a composer, I'm astonished how many people suddenly start composing in some way. They're not all academic composers. Some of them cannot read music, but they produce music electronically. They communicate in their own circles on the internet, and this is also a kind of art. This is perhaps the house music of our time, and we have to take all these things into account. And I think we have to look at the whole perspective. But the coming years will be hard, because the real stress of the crisis, of the COVID crisis, will of course appear in the budgets of our different countries. And then we have a big discussion: what role does culture play in this budget? And this discussion is just beginning, because we will have inflation, we will have a lot of cuts in the arts, and then we will have to have really good arguments to say, okay, this is the role that music, art in general plays in our society, education. And this will be a constant battle. This is my prediction for at least the next 5 years. Yeah, we just have to accept that as a fact. And the better our arguments are, and I think that conferences like this can help in this, the better we will be positioned in this discussion. That's my statement.
Thank you very much, Moritz, for this statement. I think you offer a great transition for Tere. Tere, who is the Secretary General of Cultural Action Europe, and gathered the voices of not only music, but also different cultural organizations on the challenges that are ahead in the coming years. Can you please, Tere, say a word to the attendees?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Audrey, and thanks to the European Music Forum for inviting me here. So, yeah, good morning. Yes, I am representing Contraction Europe. Contraction Europe, you know, it's a main European network that that gathers cultural networks, organizations, artists, activists, academics, and we are also a cross-sectoral network. We represent also almost all cultural practices. I wouldn't say all, because cultural practices are so diverse, but we have from music to performing arts, from visual arts to literature, museums, artistic higher education, as we were talking about, so to community projects. So almost most of the cultural practices are there. And our main mission has a lot to do with what Moritz was saying now. So it's to place culture at the center of public debate and to advocate for arts and cultures as a fundamental element of collective past, present, and futures. So we have more than 160 members, and we base all our actions and advocacy and networking and knowledge sharing on exactly the knowledge of these members, because they help to aggregate more knowledge on the reality of the European cultural ecosystem. But I would like to here very briefly introduce something that we were presenting in last November, middle in the COVID pandemic. Well, I wouldn't say middle, because I'm not sure that we are at the end, but anyway, so it was in November 2020. We presented an initiative together with the European Cultural Foundation and Europa Nostra as an umbrella initiative to try to ensure that that it's going to be a strong response towards the very serious situation of the cultural sector and the cultural rights. We cannot forget that cultural rights are also affected as other fundamental rights, of course. And this initiative is a call for a cultural deal in Europe. Yeah, we all know that how dire the situation is. We have had a lot of conversation with our members, especially with networks like EMC and other actors, and we know perfectly how the impact of COVID-19 has affected the sector. But more than this, COVID-19 has accelerated already a precarious situation that was before the COVID pandemic. So this is something that we wanted also to address in these cultural deals. And we need to know that some experts have already warned of an irreversible cultural catastrophe. I don't want to be so pessimistic here, but we know that there's a lot of losses of artists, cultural venues, festivals, that it's going to be difficult to recuperate them for the cultural sector. So what it is really at stake here, it's not only the existence of individual practices or collective practice, cultural practices, but also the access to them, and also another thing, that it's a maintenance of the diversity of the cultural practices, which is crucial at this point, and mostly in the cultural and audiovisual sector. So on the other side, and as it was said before, and beyond this sectorial approach, it is fundamental to recognize that culture is systemically interconnected to the social, economic, and environmental dimensions of our life. So this is why it is essential to address present and future challenges, considering the cultural dimension in this cross-cutting and multidisciplinary responses that we need. So for these reasons, we need this cultural deal for Europe. This cultural deal for Europe aims to mainstream culture in all policy areas and to recognize this fundamental role of culture in shaping our lives together. So in the short and medium term, the deal aimed at the beginning to fully include culture in all member states' recovery and resilience plans, so economy, of course. So we were asking for dedicating at minimum 2% of the plans of the member states to culture. So if we have time, we can discuss this later on. But we know, so you all know that culture contributes to 2% of the European GDP, and due to the pandemic, the data as the drop of the turnover in 2020 in subsectors, it's almost 90%. So this is a very high and hard data. And in the longer term, this cultural deal tries to ensure that funding for culture is integrated in other relevant EU policies and programs and actions, like Horizon, the Digital Europe, so all the programs and actions that are related to the recovery and to other policy fields. So it also calls for something that is very important, that for the reconsideration of the position of the artists and the creators and cultural workers through the promotion of the one European framework for the status of the artists and cultural workers that recognizes this atypical way of the atypical work that we do in our sector, all the people that are involved in the cultural sector. The cultural deal also recognizes or must ask for a recognition of the interdependence of all human actions in all policy fields. Again, we want to situate culture as a powerful catalyst. It is not just a new call for public support for culture. It's not only a specific sectorial claim, which is important, but we claim to go beyond sectorial perspectives and bring culture to these transdisciplinary policies that are absolutely urgently needed to address contemporary challenges. So philanthropy is another component of the cultural deal to be associated to the recovery of Europe, and this is one of the last points of the cultural deal. But the whole deal makes clear that culture acts on individuals, on communities, on social movements, and also in political and economical spheres. So the inclusion of this cultural dimension at the center of public policy debate should not be really an option. It's an urgency right now. And it is fundamental that the cultural sector is part of the dialogues that builds all these policies. So this cultural deal for Europe aims to be this overarching cultural and political force that will put culture at the very heart of public debates and decision making. And without all this, I think there's no possibility of building any common space, any recovery, it's not possible to ensure diversity. It's not possible to educate for equality, social justice, for improve all kind of life in all kinds of actions. So yes, I'm gonna leave it here. Maybe we can talk afterwards on the concern of the sector, on our advocacy works and the state of that recovery action in the diverse member states plans. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tere. Yeah, exactly. We will come back to these questions. You just mentioned how the cultural rights were affected through the pandemic, and you also mentioned that we need to go beyond sectorial approaches to build the future of Europe with culture at the heart. It resonates a lot with the Porto Charter that Paulo, I think you're going to introduce us in terms of contents, in terms of democracy, but I think also in terms of collaborative process of bringing such a work on the policy level. So please, Paulo, if you can introduce this charter, which was done on the occasion of the Portuguese presidency of the Council. I give you the word.
Thank you so much, Audrey. Like Moritz, I will be talking about this relation between culture and education. And like Tere, I will also be returning to this question of how to think culture after this pandemic, and how to rethink the paradigm of culture in our society and our policies and the way we do and what we think about what is culture and music. But let me use the text I wrote to. First, in the name of the Portuguese Minister of Culture, Graça Fonseca, I want to congratulate the organization of this European Forum of Music and to thank you for the invitation to present here the Porto Santo Charter. First, I want to answer directly to the question of this table, what place for music in society, with a well-known sentence by Nietzsche, musician before being a philosopher. Without music, wrote Nietzsche, life would be a mistake. How to celebrate life, how to mourn death and suffering, how to do a revolution, how to feel the body moving, how to annoy mom and dad and be emancipated without music. Life would really be an error. Like Leonard Cohen wrote and sings, ring the bells that still can ring, forget your perfect offering, there is a crack in everything, that's how the light gets in. But today I will not develop this problem that I would prefer to. Also, I will say, I want to answer the question, what place for music in society, with the proposition, music and the promotion of democracy. This is the title of the Porto Santo Charter, Culture, the Promotion of Democracy Towards European Cultural Citizenship. This year, the Portuguese Ministry of Culture and the Portuguese Presidency of the Council of the European Union proposed to the National Plan for the Arts to organize a conference. We proposed them to think about culture and democracy. The Porto Santo Charter is the consequence, a guiding map of principles and recommendations, 38 recommendations, for applying and developing a working paradigm for cultural democracy in Europe. The Porto Santo Charter is addressed to European policymakers at European institutions, national, regional and local levels, to cultural and educational organizations and institutions, and to European citizens to take responsibility for its common cultural landscape. The aim of the Porto Santo Charter is to outline and promote the impact of the cultural sector in strengthening democracy and democratic culture. The COVID-19 pandemic has underscored the importance of culture and music for the quality of people's life. Yet, it also contributes to raising barriers, including cultural participation. Strengthening democracy in Europe within the cultural sector requires the removal of these barriers to cultural participation and the transformation of culture into an inclusive platform as possible. The inequalities that the pandemic has exposed, the fragility of the cultural sector, and the propensity for social tensions to arise require that cultural manifestations be valued as part of the sustainable development of the European project. This charter, as Audrey was telling us, is the result of a process consultation, discussion, and collaboration with the participation of representatives of the EU member states and European institutions, associations, and networks in the cultural and educational sector, like Culture Action Europe with Tere. The Charter's content, enhancing cultural democracy, and its process, collaborative thought, constitutes unity. The Charter was presented in Porto Santo Island, a Portuguese island, an ultra-peripheral European region, transformed into an irradiating center for proposals regarding public, cultural, and educational policy. We see this Charter be a beacon to guide the cultural and educational policies, discourses, and practices, contributing for a more plural, inclusive, and safe Europe. Just to present some of the principles of this charter, and you can read it online, and I hope you can also implement it in Porto Santo Charter.eu. We want to think really about how democracy and the threats against it are the focus on intense debate once again. It is essential for democracy not to be seen as a specialized dimension of the political sector. It must be a concern that cuts across the various social sectors. We can live in a democratic state, and yet the different dimensions and institutions of community life remain authoritarian. In this sense, it is necessary to promote a conception of cultural citizenship based on pluralism, on the recognition of the multiplicity of voices, and on the valuing of differences. Reductive and single interpretations of cultural identity, in essence, deny the democratic, inclusive, and open vision of cultures. How can democracy be consolidated in the cultural sphere? What power relations are at play in cultural and educational institutions and practices? How can cultural participation help to empower people? Cultural institutions, their processes and modes of organization, what they value and propose, impact for the democratic health of a society. The Charter then is organized in this rethink the paradigm of democratization of culture and passing it to a cultural democracy paradigm. I will pass on to think, of course, the digital territories as a way of not only use this digital approach only to cultural marketing aimed at consumers, but going further into think how this digital territory can be not only used as a platform of marketing, but a way of creating a territory of cultural creation, because there is culture being created within this digital realm. Also to rethink, and this pandemic situation shown also this, that is also a space of exclusion. And we have to not forget that. And I will just finish with this relation between cultural citizenship and education. In order to promote cultural citizenship, we must place culture understood in a plural and participatory manner at the heart of educational policies, and educations at the heart of cultural policies. In order for each one to be able to participate in the culture of all people in an empowered manner, they must have the conditions to do so. It is decisive to recognize cultural institutions as educational territories, in the same way that schools work as cultural beacons. With this purpose, cultural institutions strengthen their educational role assumed in their mission and mirrored in their structure, resources, and practices. With the same purpose, in line with the model of cultural democracy, schools should value individual, cultural, and territorial specificities and enable all students to have access to a variety of artistic experiences and cultural manifestations, to have their cultural identity recognized and cultural expressions of their communities valued, to access heritage and be aware of the need to safeguard it, to develop their creativity and imagination, aesthetic sensitivity, and critical thinking throughout their education process, to be aware of their cultural rights and duties, and to discover an environment of self-led cultural participation. We then have 38 recommendations. I ask you please to read it online, because to be able to exercise the right to participation in culture, immaterial and material conditions are necessary to ensure that a substantive freedom exists, so that each person and each community can choose to participate and take responsibility for the cultural horizon of all. In order to develop this cultural citizenship that promotes democracy, we present interconnected 38 recommendations proposals addressed to the different agents of the cultural ecosystem and its different scales, and thought in a systemic way. As I was telling you, you can find all the document and recommendations in portocentocharter.eu. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes, and Katharina, thank you. She just paste the link in the chat so you can have a look at it. Thank you very much, Paulo. And yeah, one thing you mentioned, and that echoes what Angélique Kijot said in our introduction speech, is that we all have a role to play in this, and the recommendations in the charter are not only addressed to the policymakers, but also to the different cultural organizations and single individuals. We'll come back to that in a while, but and also to see how this charter can pave the way for the future of the European policies. And so I would like to address to Niklas Nienass now, who is a member of the European Parliament and a strong ally for the cultural sectors through the Cultural Creatives Friendship Group and in the Cult Committee, the committee in the Parliament attached to the culture and creative sector. So I will maybe first let you introduce your work and your actions in the Parliament.
Yes, thank you very much, Audrey. And thank you very much for these very interesting first insights already from the other experts. I think there were very important points already mentioned. First of all, I want to comment on Moritz on this occasion, because I think that the fight for the budget is not going to start, as it has already started, and I'm afraid that it is almost being finished already. We are at the moment discussing the budget in the European Parliament. We have finished the regular budget, the MFF, already last year, in which we made an increase. Maybe Barbara can comment on that later on. An increase for Creative Europe, which also means, of course, an increase for Music News Europe. But also, we are discussing at the moment the 750 additional funding, namely the RRF, so the Recovery and Resilience Facility, for which we, together with what Tere mentioned with the CAN, we asked for 2% in the Parliament, and was very happy that we, with the CCFG, actually got a support for this and tabled this amendment in the Budget Committee, and in the end enshrined it in the final resolution, that we have 2% spending of the RRF from the member states on culture. However, during the trilogue, the member states cut that out, and we don't have a binding legal case for that anymore. We only have a wording that around 5% should be spent, but there is no clear legal commitment to it. And that is a problem, because of course, words are always nice, but if nobody controls them, then that is highly problematic. So I call for the Commission and for my colleagues in the scrutiny group, and we are working on this very detailed, that we actually ensure that in the plans that the member states submit, that there are 2 to 5% being spent on culture. And that is for a very important reason. We have in democracies, we have a standard that we say same things should be treated the same way. And we have different sectors that have been struggling during the crisis in a very same and similar way. For example, the aeroplane sector, so the whole tourism sector, etc. They have in Germany at least the same number of, almost the same number of employees as we have people working in the culture and creative sector. Yet the support from the state was immense for the whole sector of aviation, where there was almost zero support or way too slow support for the culture and creative sector. And that is something where I have my doubts if politicians really realize that they are not treating the same problem with the same measures here. And so I think we need to do more and do additional work to ensure that we get additional funding during the RRF, but also, and there I absolutely agree with Moritz, in the future, when we are talking about recovery, we need and additional budgets, because the budgets will be tighter in the future. We need to ensure that culture is being supported in all ways, not just on the European level, but on national levels, in communes and where else you live and have possibilities. We need to fight for more funding, because what we need right now is, of course, an additional kickoff, that people, that we get support, that we don't lose on occasions. We already know that people are thirsty for culture. They want to go out, they want to go to live events, they want to celebrate once more, and they want to come together and listen to music. But we need to ensure that there are providers who can actually enable that, and who have the funding to actually build up the concert. And of course, we have artists who will survive to actually be in the possibility to deliver on that promise that we have culture yet again. For the future, though, I think that the pandemic, it was all the struggle we saw during the pandemic was not so much only because of the pandemic. The pandemic was the straw that broke the camel's neck. It was the drip that overflowed the basket. But the structural problems that we have all around Europe in the cultural sectors are there from the start, and they're there way longer. We have issues with social security that were not being confronted properly. If there would have been, we wouldn't have seen so much struggles currently. We have issues with freedom of the arts, because we know that authoritarians want to ensure that their culture is doing what they want. We know that in certain member states you have to follow guidance and support the nation, the state, God, or whatever, in order to get funding. We know that we see authoritarian regimes in other member states that are actively trying to influence universities for arts and culture and for filmmaking, in order that they only publicize what they want. And that is highly troubling, where we as European Union have to ensure that freedom of the arts is not just a wording that is enshrined in our treaties, but is also lived up to, and not just in a heuristic sense, but also in a physical sense. Meaning, if you don't have food on your table, you are not free to do art in a free way. And so we need to ensure that this is all there. And this is something that we have to work on, besides, kicking off and getting out of this recession, getting out of this pandemic. We have to ensure that we have social security in the future for the whole European Union in the cultural sector, including a pension fund, including social security and healthcare. And we need to ensure that we have freedom of the arts. And for that, I have also, Creative Europe is so important for a lot of creatives, musicians, as well as artists and playwrights, etc., all over Europe, because when they don't get funding from their own member states, for example in Poland, namely, they apply on Creative Europe, and it's very helpful for them to survive certain areas. And we need to ensure that, Barbara will tell you about this. We are very happy that we increased the budget so tremendously, but we still have too much applicants, not because they have bad projects, not at all. They have great projects, but we just have too little money to support them all. And so in future, and also it's very hard, of course, to have, 3 partners from different member states to work together, especially for smaller groups. It's harder. So what we need to do for the future is also to ensure, and that's something where what I mentioned in a plenary speech already after we finished the Creative Europe, is to ensure that we have also easier formats that don't necessarily require a cross-border component, so that there is support for also critical voices in those authoritarian member states, that they can be supported. Because one thing is important for politics. Politicians must not say what culture and music can or cannot do. We must just ensure that it can do whatever it wants, and for that it is very important to work. And I want to finish with a a little abbreviation from a French author. I'm sorry that I have to write the name in the chat later because I forgot it for the moment. But he said, with free press and free culture can be good or can be bad, but without freedom of culture and press, it will always be bad. And so therefore we need to ensure the freedom, and that means in a physical and a logistical way, now and in future. And that is the work that we will be doing in the next times. And so I'm very hopeful that we can work on this together.
Thank you very much, Niklas. Barbara, I will give you the word to react and to also introduce the state of your work at the European Commission. And as we're already in the middle of the conversation, I think it would be great also to follow up on the recovery plans, because some of the speakers here already mentioned the recovery plans, and also I think, which is very important in our discussion, the relation and the interaction between the European policies and then also the national policies about culture. I see in the chat that somebody says that the cultural sector has a different portfolio in the different European countries of the EU. So how do we work on this at national and European level? And I also see a question on how the organizations in the music sector should, what kind of action can they take on a short notice? So maybe on that we can go back on for instance, the Cultural Action Europe letter that was sent a few months ago to request the member states to dedicate at least 2% of the recovery plans to the cultural and creative sector. Such action was also strongly supported by the European Parliament. So maybe Barbara, first you can introduce yourself and your work and react on the recovery plan. What are the state of the recovery plan and how the Commission works on the recommendations to dedicate 2% of it to the cultural and creative sectors. You're frozen on my screen, so I hope that you get us well, Barbara. You can just leave a word in the chat or turn on your mic. Don't know if you heard me. That's the worst fear of a moderator in an online panel. So maybe in that case, Tere, if you could just introduce the letter to the member states and give us your feedback on the recovery plans and how you work with your members on the connection between the European policymakers and the member states and the governments at national level.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, on this letter, on the letter. So it was we sent in fact 2 letters. One it was together with 110 networks, European networks, international networks. We addressed the letter to the diverse, the members of the parliament, but of course heads of states and governments, the ministries of culture, of European affairs, ministers from finance, ministers for culture, the president of the commission, the president of the European Parliament, the president of the council. So it was a massive letter where we were already asking for this 2%, as Niklas Nienass was mentioning, and thank you for the support on this 2%. On the other side, we have been we we can read right now, so we can start reading the recovery plans that were sent to the Commission from the diverse member states. We are starting now the process of reading. You know, these plans are written normally in the language of every member state, and now we are working with our members to try to translate, to resume and translate what is there for culture, because of course we cannot speak 27 languages, but from the three recovery plans that we could read until now, we have France, for example. France, we have a 2% dedicated, which is good. So at least is this 2%. And more or less the commitments are broken in diverse parts. One is art heritage. Of course, heritage is it's very strongly also linked to tourism and activity in the territories, attractiveness of the countries, and so on. So another part of this recovery plan is the revival or rethinking the model of the artistic creation and dissemination. Music is in there in the framework of the credits of the music sector. So there's also a rethink of the model of the cultural sector. Then there is also some sort of support to artistic employment. Again, thanks also for this very, very important issue that worries us very much, which is the working conditions of cultural agents, cultural workers, and artists, which you already know how it is. And there's another one, which is to modernize strategic cultural sectors that are, of course, impacted in the crisis. So this is of course, there is a last one, which is almost in every plan that we have seen right now. It's this cultural and creative industries for future strategy. So this is on France. It's this 2%. On Italy, we see that it's 3.48%, so a bit above, but it's mostly related to the tourism as well and heritage. Of course, Italy, they have a huge heritage, and they want to rethink this. And and of course, cultural and creative industries are also there. In the case of Spain, it is a bit painful because the dedicated budget for this recovery fund, it's 1.2% together with sports. If you take sports out, culture specifically will take 0.8%. So it's even less than half that we ask for and the European Parliament asked for. So yes, so this is not much. Of course, that there's cultural industries there very heavily. So in the sense that they want to promote a Spanish hub, audiovisual hub. But one good news from the whole proposal from Spain is the development of the artist statute, which is the adaptation of the legal, financial, labor regulatory framework of the cultural sector to address this particularities of the sector. So these are the three plans that we have right now. So in the next weeks we will have more analysis, but probably maybe the Commission. So if Barbara can get connected again, we would love to hear from other plans, because definitely these plans we also need, and we completely support the need of monitoring this plan, the need of assessing from the Commission, assessing of the Commission to the member states to better to better invest and to really see if this money reach the cultural sector. The cultural sector, and not only so the people in the cultural sector, and not only the big venues and the big industries. So this is on the recovery plan. So I leave it here, and maybe we can talk afterwards on how we deal with our members.
Yeah, thank you. If Barbara, I see she's still not there, maybe we can find also a moment later during the forum to have an exchange with her or with the Commission on the questions that were raised during this panel. Talking about the relation between European policies, European budget, and national plans. I was wondering, Paulo, well, you just disappeared, but maybe you can hear me. on the charter, I would be also very interested to know how this text, how this charter will influence the Portuguese plans for arts and culture in the upcoming years. Paulo, I don't know if you can. Every time I address someone, it disappears. It's something strange. But all right, I will find another way, and I hope he will come back so we can address this question. Tere, you mentioned the artist status. Not sure we will go more into details right now on this, because there's a panel today at 3 on the working status of the artist in Europe. So I invite you all to join these sessions if you're interested in this idea to talk more about it. Maybe Niklas, I wanted to get back to you because we talked a lot till now on the concerns regarding the budget for culture. What Moritz mentioned at the beginning was that we can fear some budget cuts in the future. Niklas said in a way that the budgets are kind of guaranteed for the upcoming years, at least at European level. But if we go more on the kind of contents and guidelines related to these policies. In your press release, Niklas, after the adoption of the Creative Europe, and as you mentioned it a bit already, you say that we should work also on the notion of competence, because the cultural competence at the moment is a competence from the member states, but you suggest that cultural also becomes a European competence. So I would be very interested if you could develop on this idea, and maybe that Tere or Moritz can also give their feedback. And then I see that Barbara and Paulo are back, so we will go back to you in a couple of minutes.
Can I just,
Barbara, you want to say a few words first?
Can you just check if you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I've had such a rollo this morning since 9 o'clock. I'm really sorry. And I heard everybody speaking, and I was on and off. So now I'm kind of, juggling with my laptop on the one place in my house where I have internet. So you may see random things. You may see random things going on behind me.
Don't move. It's perfect. Don't move. We've got you well now. So but. Okay, sorry, I'm just changing it every time, but then as you have the word now, Barbara, would you just
I don't want to take away the floor from Niklas, obviously, who was asked a very pertinent questions, but as I'm now back in and I'm not taking any risks anymore, let me just flag a couple of things, because I've been listening to most of the interventions so far. And of course, you can imagine that we are very much following up also on the debate that is taking place in the cultural sector. And we are, of course, also very much in contact with Niklas and with the MEPs, and at the European level, also with the presidency, of course, following all the events that are taking place. And I also have to improvise, because my speech has disappeared, so I will improvise a little bit. But there's a few things that I wanted to say on behalf also of Catherine Magnan, who was initially planning to come to this panel and couldn't make it. And also, of course, of Susanne, who is leading on our Music Moves Europe initiative. And that is the most prominent and I would say important element that we have, in particular when it comes to supporting music in Europe. So both Susanne and Catherine are not there, and for a very good reason. And I think this reason you will all understand, because at the Commission level, it is our role, as you know, to make sure that all of what you said, that culture is mainstreamed into other policy areas, and that the contact with the member states, and of course also with the parliament, but in particular also with the member state, takes place at a regular pace, and that we I wanted to flag that we have, of course, been in contact with member states, and we have currently seen a lot of the recovery plans that member states have submitted. I think we cannot, of course, give out the details of what we have seen, but I can reiterate that our colleagues have put a lot of effort into trying to secure what Nienass and what Tere and all of you around the table have stressed we needed to do, making sure that member states hear how important culture and the creative sector are, not only for the economy, but of course also for participation, therefore for cultural sustainability and for the economic sustainability. So all of these more mainstreaming and overriding aspects that you have mentioned. And I think it is safe to say in a first remark, I don't think I'm giving away a lot at the moment, is that you will not be surprised to hear that there are member states that are, of course, looking very much less into this area as an area of investment for the future and in sustainability. But there are other member states, and I can see in the chat that those that know are in the know can easily identify the member states where this is actually happening, that other member states are taking this very seriously and also are seeing the potential that culture has for society in a more future and sustainability oriented development for the country. So it's difficult to make an average, but I would like to say that we can see different hooks on which this is happening. So one more thing that we would like to say is that first analysis is, of course, always looking at, where does it say culture or where does it say creative sector very clearly. But there are, of course, other areas, Nienass, Tere and Paulo have mentioned them, where culture is also indirectly involved, obviously. You've talked earlier about tourism, for example. A very close link with the cultural heritage area. And there's, of course, also a very close link, if you ask us, with the festival context when you talk about tourism. So it is fair to say that even though there are differences, we will be looking again also into all of those other areas where culture can indirectly maybe also benefit of this recovery support. And so that was my first message that I wanted to say, that this is happening and we're very much scrutinizing and making sure that that this is heard. And we're still not there yet. And just as a message of trust, also to the work of our colleagues that are doing this on a daily basis, which is why both of them, Katrin and Susanne, can't be there, because also it's fair to say that we're currently working also on the safe reopening guidance that we want to give as the Commission. And I'm not sure if you asked me this, but I'm going to tell you this, that we're in the final stages of drafting, designing, and submitting our proposal on this. And I think this is a very, very concrete support from the Commission on the ground to help the sector recover and become more resilient again. Because if I haven't said it initially strongly enough, and Nienass mentioned it, and you were very instrumental also, of course, in making that sure, is that I think one of the main impacts of this pandemic is that at the European level, the awareness is there how important culture and creativity is, how important it is for society, how important it is for the individual, how important it is for a resilient society in particular, based on cultural participation and the possibility to participate in culture, and that we need to invest in this. Hence also the higher budget that we had for Creative Europe. I wasn't planning on talking too much about Creative Europe. I'm going to pitch the panel that we have on Friday afternoon on this. But obviously, Creative Europe will take very much account the budget planning and also the way we have designed Creative Europe of the impact of the pandemic, and trying to make sure that the money reaches the sectors quickly and in a very targeted way. And one of those targeted actions, of course, is the continuation and the deepening of Music Moves Europe, because we have this very specific initiative of Music Moves Europe based on the preparatory actions that we were able to do over the past years with an innovative redistribution call that we launched last year, and that will soon see the light of day as well. And we're very much looking forward to that. And we're constantly reorienting also, of course, the dialogue with the stakeholders. So it's not only about funding, but it's also on trying to redefine constantly in which direction we need to develop our Music Moves Europe initiative further. In the legal context, of course, part of Music Moves Europe is also making sure that there's fair remuneration, that copyrights are protected, and all of this is part of the mainstreaming efforts. Then, of course, in the dialogue, the last conference that took place, that was already mentioned before under the Portuguese presidency. So we're having another panel in 2 weeks' time on the occasion of the launch of Creative Europe in Portugal under the presidency, that will be dedicated to music. And in that framework also the big dimension of sustainability that we're constantly working on, because our contribution to the sustainability goals is also something that we are developing, and that of course is linked to the work that we're doing with the member states based on culture, the work plan for culture, and the various council conclusions that we have been declining in this respect. So I think the overall context is seen and is shared. And is you can see I'm rushing because I'm so afraid to be disconnected again. I just wanted to say that I think in such a beautiful context as well, with the people around this table, this virtual table, I think we can manage to constantly make sure that the messages are heard. It doesn't necessarily mean take away from other sectors, Niklas, even though I may personally fully agree that, you may wonder sometimes where national preferences go to, but rather to constantly raise awareness of the importance of the cultural sector. This is what we try to do on a daily basis.
Well, thank you very much, Barbara. It's great to hear you. I think what we can understand is that, as you rightly mentioned, that the music sector is very broad, and so it can be also connected with different other sectors. You mentioned tourism, heritage. I think we could also mention how the performing sector or the amateur sector also are connected with different policies, and should be also maybe highlighted or mentioned in these recovery plans. This can be an opportunity, as Tere maybe mentioned at the beginning, to work more broadly on the cultural policies beyond the sectorial approaches. And just before I leave the room for the questions from the attendees, I just had two questions. The first one to Niklas about this question of the cultural competence at European level. What could it be? And also a question to Paulo after about the charter, how it can influence the European policies, and also maybe give an example of how it influenced the policies at national level. But first, Niklas, if you would like to jump on that.
Yes, sure. So the status quo at the moment is that we have, with the European Union, very little competences on the question of culture, also on education, which is same but still different. But since it was mentioned earlier by Moritz, I believe. But anyway, now let's focus on culture. There, it is mainly about the issue of cultural heritage, where we work together. There's a lot of doing cultural heritage. It's great, but it's not all, to put it nicely. And then there is the motive of cross-border cooperation in culture, and that's why we have Creative Europe. That's why we support it, and that's where the member states agree that we should ensure that there's understanding for each other, that there's possibility to learn from each other, that there's translation, for example, in videos or in books or in anything else. So this is the work that we do together. Other than that, we have little to no competences, and I think we need to question this instance because of the reasons that I said earlier. If we want to ensure freedom of the arts, not just as a word but as an action in Europe, we need to ensure to have more competences on different fields for the European Union in these cases. We need to ensure that there's funding available independent of national support for certain areas. We need to ensure that there's a social security net enacted for all people working in the cultural creative sector all over Europe, no matter where they're from. And those are the minimum standards that we need to set. There are different possibilities how we can do that. There's different ways to get there. But if we want to ensure that Europe, and that is my position, that Europe is the stable guarant for freedom of the arts all over Europe, we need to transfer competencies from the member states, just not all of them, of course, but some of them, towards the European Union, and enable them to work in this regard. We do have at the moment the Conference on the Future of Europe. It just started on the 9th of May on the Europe's Day in Strasbourg. And we do have there the possibility, at least, to tell the Council what we expect from them. And especially in culture, they're very keen to keep the competences. They don't want, and also in education, but they don't want to give up anything on that. And I'm mentioning both of them, but because if you look at Monet, one of the founding fathers of the European Union, he said if he could do it again after he established the European Union, he said if he could do it again, he would have started with culture and education. And I think it's very important to do that because we bring people together with these instances. But at the moment, the member states are keen to keeping their competences in these regards. So if we want to change it, we need to tell them. We need to ensure that the public tells the member states, the governments of the member states, so your respective national governments, that you want to see transfer of competences because you want the EU to be the stable guarant for freedom of the arts all over Europe. And for that, we can use the Conference on the Future of Europe that just started. We can use that to tell the governments and to tell the European public. I'm very happy and honored to be part of the conference itself, of the conference body. There will be 100 MEPs from the European Parliament part, but there will be also members of other parliaments, of the national parliaments, as well as Commission, etc., etc. And I'm one of the members of the Parliament that will be delegated to the conference. And thankfully, with the CCFG that I mentioned earlier, the Cultural Creators Friendship Group, we have quite a lot of those members are also part of the Conference on the Future of Europe. So I'm very hopeful, and we've already discussed, a little bit, and we'll be meeting very soon. I'm very hopeful that we can talk about this issue as well and see what can we do for culture there as well. We will also, and I'm happy for that one of the chairs for the Parliament and the Executive Board, Mr. Guy Verhofstadt, actually mentioned this instance in his speech at the start of the Conference on the Future of Europe. So there is knowledge of the possibility, there is knowledge that needs to be something done. But the next step, I think, and that all of you can help, and it's really important that all of you help there, is the conference itself is a format in which we bring together not just politicians, but especially the citizens. And that is in my understanding, also more important, there is an online platform in which every citizen can table their ideas. I have tabled only one idea on space issues, because I think as a politician, it is not my time to play and to submit ideas here. I think citizens should do that more rather than politicians at the moment. I just did this on space because it's just a so specific topic that I thought that nobody would table it otherwise. But I was wrong, by the way. But anyway, I'm asking you all to go ahead and actually table ideas and support those ideas that are already there to support culture in the future more. And there are already ideas. And it is at the moment still a quite small community. So at the moment, I think we have around 70 to 100 people maybe watching. If all of you are supporting an amendment or an idea, this will already increase high chances that we will be talking about this in the conference on the future of Europe. So please, since you're all sitting in front of your computers right now anyway, do me a favor, open a new tab and type in futureeu.europa.eu. I hope that Benjamin, my assistant, will post it in the chat as well. Click on that and register and then be part of it. Because if we want to see change made, and I believe we need to have changes made in the European architecture, then we can do it the easiest way through this, or the soonest through this conference. So please do that, and I think we can use the leftover time to discuss what, and also in the chat, what we need to do on detail. There are differences. I mean, we can also imagine to have more competence in education or in culture, etc. But to ensure that the European Union is a guarantee for freedom of the arts, that should be the bare minimum for Europe, for Europe's future.
Well, thank you very much. We had a question from the audience, and you actually already answered it. It was, are there easy actions that we as an organization in the music sector should take on a short notice? So I think you can go to the link. It's now on the chat, and table your ideas and proposals for the conference on the future of Europe, which is also an opportunity then to put culture at the heart of the European policies. It's not a conference only about culture. It's a very broad and open conference. So it's an opportunity to make our word in this European sphere. My last question before we open to more questions from the attendants was to Paulo regarding the charter. How can it also influence the European policies, and how can you reflect also on that at the national level in Portugal? How did you concretely use it in the national plans?
Yes, thank you, Audrey. Like Niklas and I would love to do this with the same passion he was doing it. We need and we count with all of you to implement or to put in your policies, institutions, and in your practices these principles and recommendations of the Charter. There are recommendations on cultural democracy. We all want to have a better sector in these terms, and we count also with these networks and that help to write this charter to continue to implement in these European, but also in national levels and institutional levels, and also to create this conscience in every citizen and European citizen, in every people, to have these rights and duties in cultural sector. What we are doing is working with these three levels: the policymakers to have a more, for instance, thinking about this recovery and this intersectoral that Barbara also was talking about. Yesterday it was presented the plan for recovery in education. We worked with the education ministry to have there also cultural introduction in the educational level, to have this presence of the participation in cultural manifestations, and not only this idea of recovering also only knowledge in mathematics and Portuguese or science or things like that. And we are working with the policymakers also in a regional and local level to rethink what is this cultural, this changing from democratization to cultural democracy. And it's something that takes time to change. It's really a different paradigm, and we are working there, but also with different cultural institutions and also educational institutions, schools, but also with museums, theaters, and these institutions to change the way they relate with people and change this inequality to a equality system. And that's what we are doing now.
Thank you. We have a question in the chat about the Portuguese recovery plan and with the application of the charter in the national plan for the arts. I don't know if you have the question, the answer. Sorry.
I don't have the answer. Sorry, Laura, but I can ask to the ministry, and after I can give you that.
Thank you. So I think with the conference on the future of Europe and with the charter, we've got two examples of tools or opportunities for the sector to act. I think we will close the panel. But maybe I want to give the word to if one of you would like to react on what was said this morning. Yeah, Moritz, I see you raise your hand. I know that the connection was not always so good, and that maybe you didn't catch up all the details. But yeah, please comment and react.
Yeah, I had really garbled voices for the last 10 minutes, but now it's better. So I hope it's because of the connection. I wanted to point on something that Niklas said that I think is really important. He was talking about, of course, we all know these nationalist tendencies in some of our countries. And just to give you an example, in Germany, we have, of course, the right-wing party is the AfD. And I just read the party program for Sachsen-Anhalt, in which actually they literally say, word for word, they said, we should cut the funding for the arts in half. The theaters should just get half. We should cut this specific festival because it is too international. And all of this written in really bad German, while at the same time saying, you know, we have to promote German culture, but just the spelling is completely off. They cannot even write a normal sentence. But that we know, I mean, I'm making fun of it, but this is really serious, as Niklas knows, as he's German as well. I mean, he knows that this is a serious danger that we all face in each of our countries in a different way. And what these the tendencies try to use, they want to separate Europe again, using this crisis where we had to be forced to close our borders for pandemic reasons. And for them, it's an opportunity to actually promote these nationalist tendencies and say, okay, we're better off by ourselves. You know, all this Europe is only giving us trouble because the pandemic is only because of globalism and so on. And they will use these as arguments specifically against culture. And we have to be very aware of that. And so I am very, very happy for all initiatives that, like Niklas said, that promote European communication and culture. We all know that our countries have different perspectives on that, but this will become really important because I see a young generation in this region that is actually very, very curious and very open to the European idea and to they want to study abroad, they want to go to other countries, they want to learn about other cultures. And this generation has now had to sit home mostly for the last 1.5 years, and they're very eager to get out. And these things should be addressed by culture. So I think that all these projects that have interchange between different countries, between Europe in general, are really, really important at the moment, because they will change our view of the future of Europe, because it depends on the young generation, most certainly. That's what I wanted to say. So I hope that Niklas fights for this in the European Parliament, and we all fight for this in our respective countries. About Germany, I can say that I'm involved in funding a society that specifically tries to promote cultural rebuilding after we hope that the pandemic will kind of be in control. And I think there will be similar things in other countries happening. So we need also some promotion. We need to involve also people outside of the arts to make to promote the arts. We actually try to speak to footballers and people not in the cultural life, but they say, okay, culture is important. Using them as advertising persons for this cause. And I think that similar initiatives will be important in other countries. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Do you mind, Audrey, just because of this that Moritz was telling us, that's really because of that, Moritz, that we, during this Portuguese presidency, we wanted to do this conference, and after this charter, about the relation between culture and democracy, diversity, inclusion, and Tere, during the meetings that we had, she used the incredible expression that I think it's very important, not only for institutions, as you will see, but for countries and our state members. Tere used this expression that is, we don't need institutions, we need exstitutions, and we grab to that, because really these exstitutions they are necessary. We have to open up and to create another sector also in cultural sector.
Thank you very much. I see that time is flying, although there are more questions raising from the chat, but the next session will actually be a networking session. So I invite you all, if you can, to stay when we'll be back in the lobby and get to the networking room. So maybe there's a way to answer the different questions. We will also continue with a short video from the live music from Live Music Now. There will be a series of videos popping up all along during the forum. And I would like to thank you all for your participation in this panel with all the ideas that you shared. And I see that it's just the start of an ongoing process, because I see a lot of reactions on the idea of European competence for culture. I saw also lots of questions about the working stages of the artists. So please stay online this afternoon for the panel dedicated to the working conditions for artists in Europe at 3. I hope we'll get the opportunity to meet in real in the upcoming months and continue all these discussions, and we'll continue to work all together. Thank you very much, and yeah, see you very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Hope to see you in person.
Bye. See you soon. See you very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Music Maker project is designed to bring Sirocco Winds, who are a great wind trio, into the school over a 3-month period to bring great live music to children who otherwise have very little access to experiencing it in the traditional way.
Having the opportunity to experience the music live means that the children who can't access the sound can feel the instruments and can experience and access music in a different way.
Achieving an effect or a result that they didn't think was possible, and just seeing that realization within them, seeing what they can do through music and what they can achieve, and I find that's really, really rewarding.
I liked learning the beautiful tunes and playing the instruments. So my favourite part was when I was meeting people and making friends.
It brings music to life for our guys. Most of our guys, or many of our guys, have hearing impairments, so recorded music and sounds off the internet, things like that, they don't get the same experience from, but to bring instruments in allows the children to feel the music and experience the music, which gives them opportunities they just wouldn't have otherwise.